So let me first start with the usual fire alarm. Please make your way to the nearest fire exits, which are clearly marked. Mobile phones, please ensure your mobile phones are switched off or on silent. If you're using modern Gov application to access the document pack for the meeting, you can continue to use your electronic devices. Members must only use their devices to access council and committee information and ensure they are not distracted by their electronic devices. Recording the meeting is being filmed for live or subsequent broadcast, except where there are confidential or exempt items. By entering the council chamber and using the public seating areas, you are consenting to being filmed. If this presents any difficulty, please inform Democratic Services. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait for an invitation from the chair. Remember to turn your microphone off when you finish speaking. Please face the microphone when speaking and speak loudly, clearly, and as close as possible to the microphone. When referring to a specific report, page or slide, mention the report, page or slide so that all members have a clear understanding of what is being discussed. And could please remember to collect your post from the members' lounge. Okay. So, before the apologies, which are going to go, we have a welcome to make, which is for Chris Haynes, who's joined this committee for the first time. I hope you have as much fun as the rest of us do, Chris. Thank you.
I don't have more, to be honest.
Good luck with that. Apologies we have received from Councillors Callanan, Kennedy, Kitchen and Green. Are there any other apologies that we don't know about? Okay. Any declarations of interest? Please raise your hand if so. Okay. Minutes of the 28th of January. Can I get your approval to sign the minutes? Please raise your hand to support that motion. Great, thank you. Duly signed. Great. Public questions, there are none. Members' questions, there are none. So why don't we leap straight into introducing Emma. Emma, thank you. If you could introduce the report on Counter Fraud and Enforcement Unit.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was miles away then. Yes, this is your update from my service. As I say, you usually get a couple of times a year, so this one is looking back on the previous year's delivery. I have touched on at 1.5 that next year will include work around procurement with ARA because of the new Act coming in, the risks. So we just want to make sure that staff are fully aware of fraud risks in the procurement cycle from start to finish. So are we thinking about what we do when we go out for tenders? Do we contract manage when everything has been put in place and the contract is being delivered? So that will be a joint piece of work with internal audit, and we'll scope it out and you'll get the information as it comes through. We also need to look at the way in which we provide fraud risk and whistleblowing training across the partnership to make it relatable for staff, quick and easy for them to follow, but to highlight the key areas that they need to think about. But also the really important thing about whistleblowing is clearly that they feel protected, that they can report any concerns in confidence, etc. So that's the focus for next year, and we'll finish off the work that we were delivering this year, the focus, which was the grant management policy, which again is in train with ARA, and the work around polygamous working, which is now in a number of reports as a high risk area due to agile working, due to the cost of living crisis. There's just lots more risk around it. So that'll be a project for HR and across the council in how we manage and mitigate that. At 2.2, the website which we're developing with the police, trading standards, victim support, that's been built, and we're just finalising the content. So that will be launched, and that's about how all our residents, colleagues, councillors can access information on what's a local scam, what are the specific risks affecting the county, how you seek support if you've been subject of a scam. It's absolutely about information, but it's localised information, so not necessarily just the national information, but it will also signpost people to how they report all the different types of fraud that there are. 2.4 talks about your matches that we deliver in terms of the National Fraud Initiative. So we're just, as usual, ploughing through those. The new set of matches landed, I think, last month. So we'll start to pick those up and I'll report them in my half-yearly report. Training, we'll continue to deliver that as is needed for the housing and tenancy staff, but also the enforcement staff, to make sure they're fully aware of what to do, good evidence gathering, good witness statements, and any updates that they need in terms of surveillance and how to undertake it. We did a piece of work across the whole partnership in terms of your small business rates relief, and that's referenced at 2.6. It didn't yield a huge amount of money, but it was a good piece of assurance work for all of the councils. So we're probably going to do that every couple of years. Again, it's just giving that assurance about the businesses across the whole county rather than just within the district. We did a very small double check at 2.7 of your single person discount reviews, and the results are there. The majority of people are honest when they return their forms to say that there is still a discount that is applicable. The area to focus in with regard to that is those that don't respond and those that don't engage with the council when we try to review. So it may be that the sample checking this year is more focused around those. 2.9 details the support we offer across the council, and I think this year's shown that we're now working with lots of different teams. They're referring different matters through to us, so that's good. It's picking up pace. And we continue to look after your council tax support scheme and support the housing staff in terms of your housing stock. I did my annual update to the housing committee only last week, actually, so that will go to them in addition to the audit committee reports to give a specific update in terms of housing and tenancy fraud work. We will do a review this year of your housing waiting list, emergency gold and silver band. We do that for everybody. And again, I've given some detail around 2.17 and 18 about why and what sort of checks we do and the benefits of doing that. And from 2.20 onwards, that's about your annual update that we are required to give you about surveillance activity, etc. But the key point is 2.27, which is the applications that have been undertaken, and for Stroud there have been none. Happy to take any questions.
I see a lot of references in here to small business fraud, tenancy fraud, rates relief for single occupation fraud. Do we do anything to check large business fraud? Those businesses that operate nationally that have got branches in the various parts of the district, or companies that have got their headquarters in the district. Do we have any measures to audit the rates and the bills that they pay, as well as what the smaller companies and the individual tenants pay?
So what type of fraud are you alleging that we investigate in terms of those?
I'm not alleging anything. All I'm saying is that British Rail have got a presence in the district. Do we do anything to check that British Rail are complying with the relevant legislation on business rates, use of the premises? The same goes for, I know Ecotricity are here, the banks are all here, or some of the banks are here. EE are here, Vodafone are here. I think they've got a shop in the town centre. So all I'm saying is the emphasis in this report is on tackling fraud by individuals or by small businesses. Do we do anything to tackle fraud at a bigger level? than that? Are we even aware that it might exist?
So we would investigate any allegations that come through. These aren't the allegations that are looked at are not about just individuals or people, but it is about the high risk areas. So if there was a specific issue with any of those companies, then absolutely we would look at it. What I haven't done is do a fraud drive on large businesses that occupy premises in the Stroud district, and there would have to be a reason to do that. So if you felt there was a fraud risk for that, then we absolutely could look at it, but we wouldn't go and just check on something in terms of a big business versus a small business.
So we go and check on individual tenants who occupy council houses. Do we always get a referral that something may be wrong before we investigate rent fraud or single use abuse of the rates relief? Sorry, I shouldn't call them rates really, should I?
Council. So yes, my team wouldn't go and visit just a property. They wouldn't go and visit one of your owned housing properties for no reason. So the only reason to investigate something would be because of a referral. So the National Fraud Initiative matches relating to the single person discount relief is because of the National Fraud Initiative. So those anomalies are identified and those are the accounts that we look at.
Yeah, if I could come in as well. I mean, Emma's very much the expert here, but I think the important thing about the schemes that you've mentioned, small business rate relief, single person discount and things like that, they are schemes where businesses or individuals are able to claim a discount from the standard amount of rates or council tax payable. So those are things where there is a risk. It sounds like in their names that we might be just focusing on small businesses or single people, but actually where those things are legitimate, then we're very, very happy to give those discount. But they are areas where people could, and in some cases do, claim a discount to which they are not entitled to. It's a little bit different to if there's a business which isn't entitled to a discount, large business, for example, as Emma's saying, we would need something specific that we are looking for. So it sounds like just the names of those things that we're focusing on particular groups, but they're the risk areas where people are claiming that discount. And as is covered in Emma's report, and I think with the timing of it, it was before the elections last year from memory, we did a huge drive on our single person's discount, just asking people to reconfirm their eligibility for single person discount for council tax. And I think the figures in there, nearly 14,000 people were contacted. And from the checks that you did, Emma, vast majority of people returned the form and there was no issue found. So, yeah, I just want to give the impression this evening that we're only looking at certain areas, and just because we want to target those groups, that's the risk, essentially.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question about the Cabinet Office's National Fraud Initiative. So as an example, on page 16 and paragraph 2.4 there, the team received 1,116 council tax related matches. Could you clarify what that actually means? So does the Cabinet Office flag up potential people that they think are likely to have committed fraud and then you investigate them? How does it all work?
So for wider information than just here, if you go to the Counter Fraud Enforcement Unit webpage, there's a link to the National Fraud Initiative, which gives you all the background detail. But effectively, the Cabinet Office asks for sets of data from all the councils across the country that they put through the machine to say where are the anomalies. So those ones that relate to council tax will be people who are claiming single person discount, but there's an additional occupant on the electoral register. So why is there a second person eligible to vote? Should they have the single person discount? So lots of those matches will be related to that. We get deceased matches for council tax liability. So that's a match. Do we know that that person is no longer in occupation? What's going on with the account? It's information like that. Our pay as staff goes to the Cabinet Office annually so that we can be checked for having additional jobs. The information about our declarations of interest. So if we've got interest in companies, that comes back and is matched. We have matches on procurement, matches on housing. So it's a massive drive specifically to target fraud within local government. It's one of the best pieces, in my opinion, one of the best things that we do. It's onerous and lots of the staff hate doing it, but it actually yields an awfully good set of results. But what it does is to ensure that we are only targeting anomalies and we're not going after, we're not looking at things that don't need to be looked at. There's a reason to look at all of those matches that come in.
I've got a couple of questions, I think, from Gareth. I say I think because I can't see them and I can't read my notes. His first comment was about the work plan. Do we get to see that? Is that something that this committee should see and approve, or is it just standard management practice?
So I don't bring it to you to approve. It's not like the audit plan. I outline in the report the sort of summary of the areas that we'll be looking at that are high risk. If you wanted us to look at anything, you absolutely could, and I would put it on the work plan. But the trouble is, it's such a wide-ranging issue now, fraud. I mean, it's enormous. It's in everything that we do, everything, every grant that we administer, every grant that we want to try and get. It's in our council tax discounts, our benefit system. So I suppose it's a case of we're looking after everything. But if you had any specific areas you wanted us to tackle, I absolutely would. But I tried to summarise to you where I want us to focus for the year. And I absolutely include everything in the report is transparent. So anything we've done is in your report. There's nothing that we've been doing that isn't reported to you.
Thank you. I'll let him know. His second point was on page 16, 2.6. The premises that were flagged for further investigation. Gareth was surmising, is that because they have got a presence in more than one of the councils? Is that why they came up?
So we did a match for all of your own data. So we did that for the 6 councils. So it was matches within your own district or borough, and then we did it across the whole partnership. And it will be people who have more than one small business. So you can only have small business rates relief if you have one. So if you have multiple across different places, then we would review whether or not there was an eligibility.
And his last point here on page 19, the financial implications. Brilliant that there's money coming in there. He's curious to know what the cost of that might be. What is the payoff? Obviously, this has to be done, so it doesn't have to make a profit, but he was curious to know if there is an analysis of that.
Yep, and that came to when we did the collaboration agreement renewal in October, I think here, we detailed what the average cost is, and I think it's about 100,000 per council in the partnership. So each of you pay about £100,000 for the service. Per annum, that is.
Thank you. I think that's all his questions, Liz.
Thank you again for a very comprehensive report, and again, and thank you for putting the sort of summary in terms of the financial implications in terms of what you managed to recover or managed to prevent us spending. So that's really good. I've just got a couple of questions. One is on page 16 on the MAF webpage, and the question is, how's that going to be publicised? Are we and Stroud going to publicise it? All the different districts are going to publicise it. The police are going to publicise it. So is there a communication programme for that in place?
Yes, so Tewkesbury will lead because it's been Tewkesbury's design team that have built the website for us, and it's attached to the Counter Fraud and Enforcement Unit website, which will be separate to the councils. So initially the comms programme will be chatted to with their comms team, and then we'll engage all the comms teams across all the partnerships so that it can be done, as a partnership all together. To make sure everybody's happy to do it in the same way, that the message gets out there really to all our residents across the whole of the county.
Thank you. And the second one was about on paragraph 216, which is the review of the housing waiting list. I just wanted to understand a bit more whether that's fraud or whether it's process in terms of who gets on the deal. I just want to understand, because it looks slightly different, you know, because you've got gold, silver bands. Is it because people sort of giving false information to get higher up the band, or is it a process thing? So just a little bit more information, please.
It's all of those things. So you've got people who will allege that they're homeless and they're not, that they're being evicted from their current home and they aren't, that they're overcrowded because they've got several children and they don't, or you've genuinely got people that have been housed and just haven't taken themselves off the list, so they don't need to be housed anymore. They've done that. So it's a complete mix of a number of things. There will also be people on there who were honest when they applied, but their circumstances have subsequently changed and they haven't then revisited the list, and so the whole point of just doing the emergency one, gold ones particularly, is because clearly those properties are for those people that are most in need. But the big saving is that we don't have to put people in temporary accommodation, which costs an awful lot of money, but for, you know, those people as well. So making sure your list is as up to date as it can be and the right people are on it is a good way of doing it. And because we do it for the whole county, it also makes it more robust in that people don't think, oh, well, they do the review at Cheltenham, so we'll go to Stroud and apply there. It's done for everybody.
Have we done one of these before? No.
No, to be fair, actually, I think we did do this for you several years ago when the partnership first commenced. But that was an awfully long time ago. But since you joined, you're on the list to be done first this year.
Hi, my question's also on para 2.2, the MAF website. Just for clarity, really, is that going to allow members of the public to self-report fraud, and what's going to be the incentive for them to do that, in the sense of what's going to be the outcome for them? Are they going to be able to have a resolution to a scam, or how is it going to be dealt with?
So yes, there's lots of different ways in which, if you mean somebody was the victim of fraud, so if they were, then they would go through the process and get the support they need. So by doing a referral, for example, to Action Fraud at the moment, if you were a vulnerable person that had had somebody take money from you on an online scam, or somehow make you go to a bank and take cash, there's an awful lot of support that goes with that is triggered by the referral that person makes. So it may also be that they will be advised about how they could get their money back. I mean, an awful lot of these scams, which is the problem with them, is that once the money is gone, the money is gone. But it's about people not being subject to further attempts or further losing money, which a lot of the time with vulnerable people does happen. So yes, the website is absolutely about, this is what you do if you will have somebody try to sell you, if you have a contractor turn up on your doorstep and say they'll fix your roof, and then they start to fix your roof and charge you 4 times all of that's on there. Things to avoid online, how to report phishing emails, how to report texts, how to get support from victim support or friends against scams. There's lots of information on there. But rather than being the same as the national, because the national websites clearly detail that, it's trying to bring it together, but it's trying to make it local. So what sort of things are we experiencing in Gloucestershire that people should be thinking about, rather than just national information?
Okay, no more questions. Then the decision is for the committee resolves to consider and comment on the report. Do we have a proposer, please? Thank you, Elizabeth. A seconder? Thanks, Robert. Any debate? Let's move to the vote then. Those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Emma, thank you so much. Right, enjoy the rest of your evening. Let's move on to item 7. Maxine, if you look forward to your report on the third quarter treasury management activity.
Right, good evening. Okay, this is to cover the third quarter treasury management activity at the 31st December. So the first couple of pages of the report are quite standard, emphasising we followed the slide principle: security, liquidity and yield. And we also have a fourth criteria for Stroud District Council, and that's ESG, environmental, social, governance. We do this by comparing investments for best ESG. So an example would be if we had two banks offering the same rate, we would pick the one with the best ESG rating. And we use a company called Camdor Global to do the screening for us. If you go on to table 1, the average interest rate, the base rate was cut on the 7th of November to 4.75, so rates available have dropped, and that's reflected in our average rate for the period at 4.899% for temporary investments and 2.97 for property and multi-assets. Overall, our combined rate today is 4.866, which is above the base rate. If you look at table 2, property and multi-assets, we have 2 property funds, Lothbury and Hermes, and 2 multi-asset funds, Royal London and CCLA. Lothbury has been discussed before. The original investment was 4 million, following repayments of 1.978 million, leaving a balance of just over 2 million, shown in the table. We have so far received £508,000 in dividends since the fund started, and they continue to sell properties to reimburse us as and when they sell the properties. We had a further 649,000 in February, and then we'll have another repayment we're told, in May 25. As reported previously, any loss of capital value will be covered from the investment risk earmarked reserve. Hermes, they're considering a merger with Legal & General, and there will be an EGM in May to consider the final proposal. We are classed as an ineligible unit holder, so should the merger go ahead, the fund will purchase the council's units at the point of merger. Royal London and CCLA, the multi-assets, as at the 31st of December, providing returns of 3.63 and 3.45. Table 3. Our ESG has been maintained at A-, and that's through, as I mentioned before, Camdor Global, who scrutinise our investments at the end of each quarter. Santander, who were previously treble B, are no longer on our list. Handelsbanken received the best rating at A+, but they're often offering some of the lowest rates, which is a shame, so you'd like to use those a lot more. Table 4, specified investments. The rate is down slightly from 5.14 to 5.12, but we're still outperforming our benchmark against SONIA, which is the standard overnight index average. Table 5, multi-assets. I've reduced the number of rows to the last 8 quarters, as requested, so it's a little bit easier to follow. In quarter 3, it was 3.36%, lower than the last quarter, but higher than the benchmark 0 to 35% shares. Table 6, same properties with a return of 2.59, slightly lower than last month, but above the benchmark property index. Our external borrowing remains at just over 100 million, and our CFR is 130,945, so we've got room to borrow if we required, or internal borrowing. Compliance, we've operated within our limits, so there's no breaches. Financial implications, a risk reserve is in place of 1.493 million to cover any losses on the expected closure of the 2 property funds. There's no legal implications. Environmental, the council has an ethical investment policy, which is being revised later this year once the final accounts are out the way. Appendix A is the prudential indicators. There's not a lot of movement in that since the last quarter. And Appendix B is an explanation of the prudential indicators. And that just about wraps me up. Any questions?
Hi, Lucy. The investment funds that we invest in, it says right at the end that we try to be ethical in our investments. Who audits where people like Santander and the other funds that we use, where they actually invest the money for us to get a return? Do we check they're not investing in arms companies, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
That's why we invest Camdor. We send up a list of all our investments at the end of every quarter, and they look at what the banks say they're going to do to be ethical. They will actually do a lot of delving and see, are they actually doing it? And that's when they come back with the ratings, and we get quite a full report saying if they're lending to companies with plastics or fracking or anything like that.
Hi. Could you, on table 3, you've just referred to the Santander investments as triple B, and I think you said that we didn't have any. No, look, we did have until December 24, but so where has the money gone? Where has it been invested?
Well, that would have been reinvested in one of our other banks, like Landesbanken or Goldman Sachs International.
Right.
One of those, yes, been reinvested in there.
So Goldman Sachs is also triple B plus. So would it have gone to Goldman Sachs?
Goldman Sachs on here is
Triple B plus. Oh, there's nothing in
nothing
there.
there at the moment, no.
So would we? I suppose what I'm asking is would you invest in anything that was just triple B when we've got lots of green A?
Well, we can do, but we always try and go for the highest ESG. We avoid those
Right.
where possible. It'd only be if the funds were all full up. We didn't have a lot of choice.
Okay.
But we have quite a diverse portfolio that we can use.
So there aren't any funds in Goldman Sachs at the moment?
I don't think so. No, that's the money market fund at the top.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Sorry, the one, yes, I see.
Yeah, then the three
Which is an
quarters.
A minus, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thinking about our property funds, so of course there's a long history with Lothbury, but now there's this comment about Hermes as well. It seems that with this type of fund, we're quite susceptible to decisions made by parties upon whom we have no influence. In your view, is a property fund a good place to invest our money in the future, or do you think you might be moving away from them?
I'll probably take that. They have been in the past, and they were somewhere where councils were able to get a very good long-term return. And the whole rationale for going into them was that there was money that we were happy to tie up for a number of years, because property clearly is quite a stable thing. You're absolutely right that what we have found is that in the property investment market the last few years, one of the things we've seen is that other large-scale investors, things like pension funds and things like that, if they need to realise their investments, liquidise their investments quickly, they will look to sort of sell the properties in the fund. And in a market of rising interest rates, that's what a lot of them tried to do. So yes, we did find ourselves susceptible. I think there is still a place for property investments, and we've still got them within our treasury strategy, but I don't think that we will be looking in the short term to be investing in any pooled property funds, particularly with the uncertainties around the future of local government and things like that. So they're still there within our strategy, but we've certainly not had any discussions for a long time about new property funds or anything like that. We're just managing what we've got at the minute.
Could I just add that when we had these property funds, the base rate was only 0.25, and if you look on table 6, you can see that the rates were all over 3% at the time.
I've asked this question before about our investments in other councils, and I'm interested to see that we're not investing in Surrey or Central Bedfordshire, but we are now investing in a number of other councils, and I'm interested to know how we choose them because they're not rated formally. So how do we choose that it's fine and safe to invest in Peterborough or Reading or Torvine or Cheltenham? How do you make that judgment?
There's no exact list to follow, like you said. So what I do, is Google. And if there's any that I'm not too sure about, then I'll go to Lucy Clothier, the deputy, section 151. But yeah, I do a lot before make the move to invest any money with them. Quite careful.
And I think I'm right in saying, Max, that essentially it will be whatever's in the market on a particular day. So the broker will be saying to us that Council X is in need of short-term funds, and then Max will do the review. So we're not starting from a position of we need to invest some money, let's pick a council, if you like. It's kind of who's in the need, because actually, certainly my time in Stroud, and I imagine a long time before, we've never been in the market. But it's actually very, very common for councils to be looking for short-term cash day to day. Lots of councils have that as a strategy, and other councils are often a good place to borrow from. So they'll be in the market talking to brokers saying, we need X million to cover the sort of time from the end of the month to when the council tax direct debits come in. Which councils have got a bit of spare cash? That's where the brokers will then approach us and say, so we don't start from a blank sheet.
Yes, I kind of guessed that. I suppose that where I'm coming from is my slight nervousness about local authority funding at the moment, on a national scale, and just being clear about how secure some of this is in the context of budgets and what's happening at a national level. And that's where I get a bit jittery about how do we make judgments that it's a safe place to invest, particularly if we have other options.
Yeah, we do have actually a limit of 12 million as at 31st. So there's a restriction there, and there's only 4 million per authority. And like I said, you go on to the net and research their accounts, get all the latest information. You also get Room 151. It's a really good one. So that comes through regularly, flagging up councils that might be having a few problems. And then keep a list. We've got quite a long naughty list, but it's not really good to call them a naughty list. They can't help it. About 30 or so. And there's probably only about 10 to 15 on the good list. So we are quite strict in who we pick. Yeah.
Yeah. I think my question is an extension on Kate's question, and that is, what about LGR? And what impact does that have of if we invested in money in the council and then they go through a local government reorganisation and they become a different council? How protected is our money in that instance? Have we got any protections? And should we factor in that in our decision making, even if it's a question of that might affect our ability to get the money out when we want it, if not necessarily an issue with actually the capital amount we deposit?
So I think against the sort of backdrop of all of the sort of questions around interlocal authority lending, this is a very secure market, and I absolutely understand your position that 5-10 years ago it wasn't in the news about local authority finances, and now it's a daily occurrence. But local authorities haven't defaulted on loans to other councils. LGR, the really technical answer is that any money owed by one council would become owed by a new council, and I don't see any scenario where that would create any difficulties getting the money back at all, to be honest, because it would just be as part of the process of amalgamating councils, finances are combined, and funds would be returned out of the new successor council. So I don't think it is a risk that we wouldn't get any money back as a result of LGR. I don't see that at all.
I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Gareth. On table 2, the total property fund of 6 million and a valuation of 2.8. He's curious to know how you get a return of 2.75% when it looks like it's dropped by 50%. Table 2, the percentage return from April to December 24 is 2.75%. But I think what Gareth is saying is you start with 6 million, it's now worth 2.8. How do you calculate a 2.75% return on that? I think the answer is we've had other payments in payments from those funds, so that's how you calculate it. But if you want to take it offline and drop a note to Gareth, that'd be so just explain the numbers, that'd be great. Thank you.
Just, I'm sure Max will do that, and it is a combination of the capital change and the interest. But the other complication factor in that table is that Lothbury have been selling properties throughout the year and returning money to us. So it looks like a fall in value, but actually that's because we've had the cash in. So I'm sure, Max, you can pull that all together.
Yeah, I think the figure on Lothbury at the moment, we're probably at about 3.5 million, aren't we, in terms of what we've got back through dividends and sold.
2 million.
About 2.5.
Right. There's still a valuation of 1 in there.
Exactly.
So yeah. So the overall loss is probably about 500,000, unless things perk up in the next couple of months. Right, thanks.
Sorry, would it help if we showed divestments on here so that we knew which part of the loss was due to the thing dropping in value and which part was because we'd sold it and got the cash returning? Would that be possible?
Yes, I think what we'll do with Lothbury is I think the final properties are due to be sold in May, I think it is, May, and we'll get the last bit of money back. And what we'll do is a summary, Chris, of where we've been.
That's fine. Yeah.
And I don't wish to sound dismissive at all here, but I can't remember how long we've been reporting Lothbury to the committee. It's about 2 years, so we've been through multiple different reports and things like that. But what we'll do is a summary when it's all come in, so you can see it really clearly.
We're the first people that noticed it's falling in value and giving a positive return.
It's been a long history of reporting.
Okay.
Right, thank you. Oh, Robert, gone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just one extra one. So on table 3, where we've got the list of institutions and organisations that we're invested in, am I right in thinking that, say, with someone like NatWest, we have a specific financial product like an ETF or something with them, rather than just giving them some money? So is it possible to see the specific funds that you've invested in, so we could, for example, look up what the performance of that specific fund is?
NatWest.
Well, yeah. So, for example, where you've got other banks, you've got NatWest, Lloyds, Santander. They are banks,
Yeah.
but they will presumably offer a specific financial product that we are investing into. So, I'm wondering, is it possible to see what they are?
We only do fixed deposits, certificates deposits, and money market funds, property funds, and multi-asset funds, and call accounts. We don't go into any unusual investments. So it'd be fixed term. You fix from say the 1st of April for a year to 31st of March. CDs, pretty much the same thing. Money market funds we can call those back daily. Have I got the right end of the stick?
Yeah, maybe I'm not asking the right question. I'll think about it, possibly contact you after.
Okay.
Thank you.
I note on table 3 that the ones that I know that are American are Federated Prime and Goldman Sachs, and we appear to be divesting ourselves of those investments. Is that deliberate in light of the political situation in the US at the moment? If not, are we taking steps to make sure we are secure from the crash that is potentially going to come on the New York Stock Exchange?
Well, Federated Prime, although it's part of New York Bank Mellon, once you look underneath that, it's made up of lots of investments all over the world. So it's not just American. So it could be American, it could be all over Europe, across to Australia. There's lots of different countries within each one of those money market funds.
Are we divesting ourselves of American listing or American
No.
stocks, which could be considered high risk at the moment?
What I'd say is that we work closely with, I was going to call them Link, they're not Link anymore, MUFG, our Treasury advisors, and they advise us and they do reports to this committee on the wider global economic position. We don't make any investment decisions based on political factors, but if they advise us that credit risks have changed or anything like that, then we will change our investments. But we as individual officers are not looking at individual political processes or anything like that and making calls on that, but we work with Link and their advice and their credit rating. As Max says, with exceptions of the 4 funds, the 2 property funds and the 2 multi-asset funds, those investments are not ones which will fluctuate in value, apart from us redeeming and then making new investments. But there is always the risk of capital loss should a fund fall, essentially. But that's where we take Link's advice on what the credit position is, not Link, MUFG.
Okay, thank you. Can we move to the resolution, the decision? Audit and Standards Committee resolved to accept the Treasury Management Activity third quarter report for 2024-25. Do we have a proposer, please? Thank you, Kate, and a seconder. Thank you, Martin. All those in favour? Unanimous, great, thank you. Let's move on. Maxine, thank you so much for your time, for the hard work you do there. Appreciate that. Pirish, over to you for the rest of the evening, I think.
I shall be speaking a lot, Chair, this evening, and I hope I don't bore you with my dulcet tones. But, Chair, good evening to you and to the committee. So your first item is the internal audit charter. So today's a momentous day, Chair, because as of today, the new global internal audit standards known as the GIAS take effect, and they have replaced the previous SIAS, which was the public sector internal audit standards. And you will, committee will recall that I brought a paper to explain all of these changes at your previous meeting in January. So going forwards, Chair, all of our work will now, as of today, be in accordance with the GIAS, but also SIPFA have an application note and a code of practice for internal audit, which both support the GIAS and sort of governance around internal audit. So those also take effect today. And so our work will be in accordance with all 3 of those. Now, amongst the requirements of the GIAS is that internal audit needs to maintain a charter, an internal audit charter, and something called a QAPE, which is the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. And both of these are on your agenda, starting on page 39 with the charter. This will be periodically reviewed, and we will ask senior management and this committee ultimately to approve that charter on an annual basis. And there's a number of requirements for internal audit that are in the charter. So we are required, for example, to state what our mandate is, where we get, in other words, the authority to do the work that we undertake. What the purpose of our work is, what the purpose of internal audit is, the scope of our work and the responsibility, and also to state what our position within the council is, and that refers to our sort of how we report and the access that we have to voice any concerns. So on page 41, we set out the mandate and authority for internal audit, which largely and nominally comes from the 1972 Local Government Act, as well as the Accounts and Audit Regulations of 2015 and its subsequent amendments. On pages 41 and 42, we also lay out the purpose and definition of internal audit, and how by undertaking our work we seek to help the council to achieve its objectives. And we also set out on those pages our mission and our vision. We also confirm here that internal audit should be seen as a critical friend to challenge the status quo, but also, the reason for that is that we want to support improvement across the council. On page 43, Chair, I then set out the position of internal audit within the council and the various reporting lines, and that includes having unfettered access to both yourself and to this committee, as well as the Section 151 officer and the chief executive, should that ever be necessary. I'm delighted to say that in 34 years I have never ever had to use that dotted line, and long may that continue. On page 44, we also set out the how we comply to the Code of Ethics to ensure that our work is undertaken in a professional manner. On page 47, I do set out again the scope of our work, which essentially is the audit universe, Chair, that I mentioned earlier this evening, and it includes all of the activities of the council. Having said that, I do clarify on page 48 that it is the council and its officers who own and are responsible for all of the risks of the council. On page 51, Chair, I set out how this committee can help internal audit to undertake our work. There is, on page 52, just to say, there is a small typo, Chair, for which apologies, at paragraph 20.1, Roman numeral 8. It is, that should, instead of saying approve the internal audit plan, that should say agree the internal audit plan. And that is to protect internal audit's independence. We are able to look at what we feel we should be able to look at. So apologies for that. It is a small typo. On page 53, then, Chair, is Appendix B, which is the actual code of ethics that we abide by. And as you can see, Chair, this is very comprehensive, as you would expect for a professional service. So I'll pause there, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
I haven't read this. My apologies for that. I didn't get a chance to read it before coming here this evening. In the internal audit charter, do you have the right to investigate where money that was received for a specific purpose, do you have the right to audit that it was actually spent on that specific purpose? I was thinking of an example that Bob knows about. We received money from a developer to pay for improvements to a road junction. That money was paid over to Highways in Gloucester. They gave a written undertaking to do the work, and it's never been done. Do we have the right to audit where that money is now and what's happened to it, and why haven't they spent the money doing what they said they would do?
I believe, Chair, this relates to an email exchange, I think, that we had, and I understand, I think where we left that was that you or somebody, a member, had received some responses from the county council, and therefore you're not wrong, but with regards, I think, to that issue, I left it with yourself, Chair, I think.
Where money that's given to the council for a specific purpose actually gets spent, whether we spend it ourselves or whether we spend it by the county.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yes, we can certainly look to do that. Yeah.
And in this particular, the case that you've highlighted, and it's not the only one, James is looking into this in the next audit of that funding as to how that process works, how well it works, I believe. Is that right?
There is an audit that has just recently commenced, I think, looking at Section 106 that we are undertaking, so that will hopefully address some of the issues. Yeah, if it's fraud, I would look to Emma to under a specific fraud investigation. if it was fraudulent, we would refer that back to Emma and the CFEU to investigate. It's sometimes a fine line between what's a fraud investigation and what's a piece of audit work, but I think between us, I'm sure that we could ensure that any concerns and risks were addressed.
Piyush, I just didn't catch which word we were supposed to be altering on page 52.
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind repeating.
So it is on page 52 at paragraph 20.1,
Yeah.
Roman numeral 8.
It says approve.
Yes, so that instead of approve, that should be agree.
Agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 47, paragraph 9, well, first, thank you for your comprehensive document here. My question is really just a point of clarity in terms of reliance on other assurance providers, because it mentions you may rely on work if it's deemed relevant and appropriate. Is that word appropriate, does that include the notion of, an appropriate quality as well? Because I was just also looking for sort of the quality word in that and I couldn't see it. But is that word appropriate also to include quality in terms of appropriate quality?
Absolutely right. I mean, there are numerous, His Majesty's Inspectorate, for example, there's Ofsted and Ofqual and the Building Safety Regulator, for example, which is mentioned in further in the agenda. So if it is a professional organisation, what I'm saying is we can place reliance on the quality of their work. So what I'm saying is we would need to look at each case on its own merits and determine how much assurance we can take from that. What were their terms of reference? What was the extent, for example, of their work? So, was it purely held on discussions, or did they undertake a review of documentation? Did they do any data analytics? Anything like that? We would need to look at each piece of work on its own merits to determine how much reliance we could place on it.
Yeah, it's just reassuring that you just articulated that, because obviously it then means that we've got consistent quality from the work that you've done and on the work that you've relied on others as part of your delivery of your work. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any further questions. Let's move to the decision. The committee resolves to 1, approve the Internal Audit Charter, Appendix B, and 2, note the Code of Ethics, Appendix B. Sorry. Do we have a proposer? Chris, thank you. And a seconder. Thank you, Martin. Oh, just going time. Right. No comments. So let's move straight to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. We'll move on to the next item, please, Piyush.
Well, yes, thank you, Chair. So, excuse me, on page 65, Chair, you have the next item, which is the Quality Assurance and Improvement Plan, which is usually abbreviated to QAIP, which is the initials of Quality Assurance and Improvement Plan. And one of the requirements of the previous SIAS public sector standards, but also of the new global internal audit standards, is that the internal audit should maintain a QAIP. In a nutshell, Chair, what it is, it's the primary objective of the QAIP is to promote continuous improvement and to enable internal audit to meet its mandate and to ensure that we continue to deliver a professional service and the best service possible. So the global standards require that on an annual basis, we undertake a self-assessment against the GIAS, and that any areas that we identify as requiring improvement, we need to add to the QAIP and put on there how we are going to address those issues, how are we going to make sure that we improve, to have dates for action or action by dates on there. And we need to bring that to you, A, for your oversight, and B, for your approval of that. And so on page 72, we do set out, Chair, in some detail the actions that we will undertake to ensure that we do continuously improve the service that we provide. Now, that is slightly different to the external quality assessment, which I do mention in the progress report later. And again, I brought a paper on that at your last meeting. So the internal is purely us looking at ourselves. The external quality assessment, the requirement is, as a minimum, to have that at least once every 5 years. Yep.
Thank you. What questions do we have? Ooh, Robert, then Kate.
Thank you, Chair. If I can ask a question on behalf of Councillor Green. So her question is along the lines of, how do you measure and record progress with the internal audit quality assurance and improvement programme? So is it something that you'll just have a nice big spreadsheet with? Is it something that aligns with IdeaGen in some way? What do you do?
So it's an internal document, Chair. It wouldn't be on IdeaGen itself. I mean, we do have performance indicators which are reported to the committee and which will be reported to the committee, but it is done largely via self-assessment. But as I say, as a minimum every 5 years, there would be an external assessment as well, which would make sure that what we are reporting is accurate.
I'm looking at page 77 and your self-assessment that you did for 2025-26 for GIAS, and referencing the earlier conversation we had about looking at the reds and the oranges. I must confess, I was concerned that in the first domain, recognition of the purpose of internal auditing and honesty and professional courage, you'd only self-assessed as partially confirmed. And I wondered if you could just explain that. And similarly, the coordination and resilience does not conform. I guess that comes back to your comment about having a better package in terms of a case management package that you need. But it was the two oranges at the top, because actually, from my experience of you, you are extremely honest and you have a lot of professional courage. So I'm not sure why you're only saying partially confirms this.
So, Chair, thank you for those questions. This is a self-assessment against the new standards which have just come in today, and I have to thank our group manager who led on this with input from myself. But together we assessed ourselves against the new standards. And what I would say is that I think we were quite hard on ourselves. In other words, we didn't stretch a point. You know, I think there's a temptation sometimes if you do a self-assessment, you can say, oh, we just about meet it, but you're not being honest with yourself. So I think partly why we've got those is because we were harsh or harder on ourselves. We probably do meet it, but we just want to top and tail. I think also the other thing is around, for example, professional courage. That is a new requirement in the GIAS. So for us, it's about ensuring that we have internally the right standard operating procedures and the right way to measure professional courage. But we also have to provide training to our staff to say, you know, what do we mean by professional courage? How do we evidence professional courage? So the fact that they're orange, it doesn't worry me, Chair, because it's only just come in today. This is a self-assessment, as I say. So I suspect we do meet it, but we will need to get this confirmed in an external quality assessment, which will probably happen next year against the new standards. With regard to the red, the reason that is a red, it's mostly around not resilience, but the coordination aspect. And what I was discussing just a moment ago, and Councillor Pearce raised about third-party assurances. The actual standard within the global internal audit standards says that you can have multiple sources of assurance. So we are one, but as I mentioned, there could be His Majesty's Inspectorate, some other professional body that comes into the council. And what we should do is to coordinate our activities so that at the very least we avoid any duplication of activity, that they end up doing a piece of work, we end up doing a piece of work. So we should ask them what they're doing, they should ask us what they're doing. The difficulty, and this is a difficulty that colleagues at other councils, at other internal audit providers have expressed as well, is we in internal audit are not always aware that a particular inspection is about to happen. We often find out after it has happened. And so how do you coordinate something that has already happened? And so that is why we've given that a red, because I think we're really waiting for some guidance, I suppose, from SIPFA as to how we can address that. It is an issue that is identified at several councils. Part of the answer is going to be people like James being involved in this council's governance group, in the senior management team discussions, and being able to be aware of the kind of inspections that are going to happen in the future, which would then allow us to coordinate those activities. So it's tricky, and there are solutions, but at the moment what we're saying is just to be honest that we don't always do that because it's not always possible.
Taking us back to page 73 here, there were just a few things there that seemed to be saying there's a bit of cause for concern. Some audits taking greater length of time to complete than others, and looking into why that would be. Guidelines introduced last year to support time management, give auditor and client dates to work to. Auditors now working on fewer audits at any one time, but particularly the bit about the software right down at the bottom. Due to Power App developer resources being limited, there has been no progress during 2024 to 2025. I'm summing up my question. Should we be worried?
About all of those things? Or?
About all of those things,
Okay,
yes.
I mean, the answer is no, because these are, they are known, we are working to ensure that we address these. I mean, just the software, for example, even since we wrote this report, there has been quite a lot of movement. The developers, as it says there, are now in post. They have access to our processes and our current audit management system, so they can see how we work at the moment. But there's been a lot of engagement, particularly with our group manager, on what our ambition is, what we want from a new audit manager. So we're starting with a blank piece of paper, and we had a team meeting about a month or so ago, where we said, if you had a wish list, you wanted to make your coffee for you in the morning, be creative, imaginative, but realistic. And so we had a whole team session, and we've given all of these thoughts to the developers, who will now try and develop all of these into an audit management system that we think is going to be absolutely cutting edge and probably one of the best out there. The reason being, it's because it's being developed from scratch. It's not an off-the-shelf, package that you then, yeah. But no, Chair, this what this represents and you will be able to see in subsequent meetings when I bring this to you that we will have ticked off a lot of these actions, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. My question's on page 72. It's a question, or rather sort of a discussion, really. I don't know whether it goes into debate, but I think it's great that we've got some performance targets, and I think they are good in terms of the targets. My only concern on the audit recommendations in terms of rate of recommendations, when you put a target on, is that there may be a tendency among officers to get the low-hanging fruit and do all the lows, possibly a few mediums, but the highs, the important stuff, are difficult to do. And so they'll leave them. They'll still get the 80%, but they'll leave all the hard stuff. That would be my concern in putting the performance, but that is quite broad and covers all of the high, top, medium risks, rather than perhaps banding it and saying, making sure include 80% of highs, mediums and lows, or some other words within that target, because that would be my concern, is that they just go for the easy ones, leaving the hard ones. And we've seen that in the table that we now, which is really helpful to have in terms of historic actions. It's the sort of the high ones that are sticky, and this won't necessarily pick those up.
I don't disagree. I think, well, there is a possibility of that happening, but as I just mentioned a moment ago, they are the risks of the council, and we're trying to help the council to manage the risks by providing this committee and senior management with a spotlight on these sort of issues. And I guess if, I'm sure senior management would want to see all recommendations implemented, and it may be that if something is delayed, there could be assistance in ensuring that gets put across the line, if that makes sense. That something important isn't left undone. In terms of this particular KPI, as it says at the bottom, it is something that was recommended to us or suggested to us by the assessor, the independent assessor. You will receive their report at your next meeting, the full report, where you will be able to see where this has come from. So we've added it. It's new, and we will need to see, I think, in the fullness of time how, are we able to meet that 80% or not?
I think the question is probably for Andrew, in many respects, because it's measuring management response around, rather than necessarily internal audit in this particular target.
I think the targets there are kind of ones I'm comfortable with. I think what I'd like to see is how we do against them, and if we are inadvertently creating what's the phrase, perverse behaviours by having these targets. If we end up seeing that we're rushing through lots of quick recommendations, I actually think, and I don't know what our current performance would be in terms of recommendations accepted by management. I'd be really surprised if we weren't already at well over 95%, if not close to 100. I think we have a very good culture here of accepting recommendations. So I personally, I'm happy with the targets if the committee are, and I think we need to review how the performance goes and what it's telling us. And if, on your previous point, Martin, about the sort of medium, low and high, if we do find that we're hitting that target, but it's always the high priority recommendations that are left, then I think something perhaps a bit more nuanced around high priority recommendations might be worth looking at.
Thank you for that reassurance. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. On page 72, in the table, audit recommendation, it says the original target rate. Should that be target date?
Yes, Chair. Yeah. Well done. You win a prize for spotting the deliberate error.
I used to be quite good at reading these. I got bored with it now. The other question I've got for you, and it's it's not a clear question even in my mind, to be perfectly honest, is the percentage of audit coverage the audit plan's delivered. What causes you to investigate a process or a way of doing something? How is it referred to you? Do you have ways of getting stuff referred to you by the people who work in the process, the people who are customers of the process? It's kind of, to be honest, I've done what you're doing in the city, and I've come across people who are quite good at constructing this type of report because they knew they could meet it all the time, because they never allowed outside things to influence what they were going to investigate or what they were going to look at or what they were going to talk about. Now, I'm not saying that would be you or anything like that. I'm just kind of intrigued as to what kind of triggers you to say, this process isn't working, we need to go and check it. And somebody says, oh no, you don't have to investigate that. Do you have the power to say, yes, I do? It's kind of what triggers your work to happen type of thing. Sorry, is that clear?
I hope so. I think so. I mean, we have the internal audit plan, and we had a session earlier before this meeting about how some of the stuff that we look at ends up being looked at by us because there's a perceived risk, a certain risk rating around it. So we think that could be a high risk area. We need to look at that. It could be because it's suggested by a member or the committee that something should be looked at. It could be something that James picks up from his discussions with management. It could be a suggestion from management. In terms of reporting, there is a whistleblowing option as well, which can be anonymous. So there's all manner of reasons and ways that we would become aware or decide why we should undertake a piece of work.
And do you have a record of the audit plans that you have got planned or that are underway, and what the source of that request was?
Yes, so we do have the draft audit plan later on in the evening, which shows some of our justification for including those pieces of work.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no further questions, then let's move to the decision. The committee resolves to approve the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme 25-26, Appendix A, notes compliance against the global internal audit standards in the UK public sector for 25-26, Appendix B, and 3, to note the compliance assessment against the public sector internal audit standards for 24-25, Appendix C. Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Robert, and a seconder. Thank you, Matthew. In that case, let's move straight to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pirish. Let's move swiftly on to... Oh, it's Pirish. Internal audit strategy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again, Chair. So on page 85, you have the internal audit strategy. Now, this is a new requirement, Chair, in that it's kind of been suggested and probably mooted as a good idea in the past, but it's never been a mandatory requirement. So the new GS requires that we have a standalone strategy. And I guess it's not to say in the past we've never had a strategy of, where we want to go, what we want to do, but rather it was expressed probably through the QAPE that we've just discussed, rather than being a standalone strategy. And I guess partly also because there maybe some duplication between the strategy and the QAPE. So what we have is we have prepared a strategy and we've kept it quite high level, I would suggest. The detail would be in the QAPE. But as I say, so for the first time we have this strategy. It will come to this committee on an annual basis for your approval. So happy to take any questions.
I'm looking at page 87, and it's paragraph 1.1, Roman numeral 1, where you talk about maximising the benefits of artificial intelligence tools. And I'd be very interested to know, what are those AI tools that you have that you can use, and where do you get them from, and how safe are they?
Very interesting question. So this is obviously a new area, Chair, and it's developing all the time and rapidly. At the moment, we do not have an AI tool. This is part of our strategy going forward. So I mentioned a moment ago that we are developing a new audit management system. What we would like to develop is an AI capability, and it's not pie in the sky, because I have seen real life examples of some other internal audit teams that have developed this capability. And I like to see it as a tool. It's not you press a button and it does the audit for you. It can help. It can help you do data analytics. It can help you to prepare audit programs. It can help you to identify areas of risk. It can even prepare a first draft of a report, for example. It's quite clever. You could write in your report and it will identify themes. So it will take the last year's audits or the last 3 years audits and say, these are the key themes which have emerged from. So it's a very enabling and quite a powerful tool. In terms of safety, we cannot just go out and start using Copilot or ChatGPT or something like that. And that's because Stroud does, county does, city does, all councils have GDPR regulations, they have data protection regulations. And so any future use would have to align with all of those requirements that the council places on us in terms of, as it were, allowing data in. In other words, it can search the web for useful resource, but not allowing data out, so nobody can see. Just as with any other council record, be they council tax records, housing records, those sort of things. So we need to be careful about it, but I have seen real life examples, and there are products out there. So as I mentioned, Copilot, which is the Microsoft product, I think if we go with something, we'll probably look to develop that. There is a project at the county council, and they are looking to pilot areas. And so we put our hand up and says, we'd like to be a pilot, build a test model and before we start using it in anger. So it is something in the future, but it is something that we think could be very useful.
Yeah, could I just sort of continue that point, which I understand, and I have seen, in fact, my old audit function use sort of AI to produce reports and things. But I guess within the strategy, I'm a little bit nervous because there's no, you've allayed in terms of words, but it's not in the strategy to say that this will be done in consideration of maintaining quality and objectivity and all of those good checks and balances that really ought to be there, and you articulated that they're there, but they're not in the strategy. To sort of say that, because at the moment it says maximising the benefits of AI tools, it doesn't sort of couch that, but only if, etc., etc. And I think personally, I would feel more comfortable in having some sort of a carry-on sentence to say that all the, as you've just done, in terms of the quality that we've just done with the new standards, all of that will remain when you employ it. I don't know what other members think, but that would be my personal view.
And thank you for that. I mean, obviously, this is the first strategy document that we prepared, but we'll go away and see how we can develop that in our future strategy. Yeah.
No further questions. Let's move to the decision, which is that the committee resolves to approve the internal audit strategy for 25-26 Appendix A. Do we have a proposer?
Can I just interject?
Yes.
Because I would only want to improve it if it's got that sentence in it that I've just suggested.
So how would we? Yeah,
we need to propose an amendment.
Yeah. Go for it. You'd like to propose an amendment.
So,
no, your computer's died on you.
it has, yes.
You're not relying on artificial intelligence there.
So I propose amendment that we accept the strategy with the modification that paragraph, it's 1.1, section 4, includes a sentence to the effect that AI would be used only with existing quality and professional safeguards in place, something like that.
And GDPR. Yeah. Thank you. Right. So we'll. Right, in that case. Sorry?
It's on page, my system is. Yeah. Page 77, paragraph 4.1, section 1.1, Roman numeral.
I think the numbering is a bit weird, isn't it?
Yes.
It's probably 4.2.
It probably is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to make reference to the exact.
Right. Okay.
Have you got that, Daisy?
I was going to add as a general point, I think we focus on AI and rightly so. I think anything which ARA does will always be with an eye on the appropriate standards and objectivity and GDPR. I think that's a given, but I absolutely understand that as a new and emerging technology that the desire to have something specific in there. Right?
I was going to say, Chair, I know it's not explicitly stated there, but it's implicit because we would not be allowed to use something anyway. I don't know if that assures you, but...
I do understand that,
yeah.
but I think probably as a member on the committee, I'd like to see it in, also black and white, but it's in red, in terms of the amendment. Yeah, yeah.
Is yours a point of information, Chris, or are you wanting to speak to the amendment?
No.
Which one is it?
I wanted to query something that's in the amendment.
Okay. So we're wordsmithing, basically. Chris, what's your comment?
Haley's mentioned, can we just put sort of, and what was it? Relevant legislation, which would include GDPR. Or relevant legislation, in bracket, including GDPR.
Okay. Sorry?
Is that the wording work?
Yeah, I'm happy with
Yeah. Over that. Okay. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. Okay. Against? Abstaining? Thank you. I knew you'd get there at the end. Right. So that motion, that amendment is carried, and now the new substantive motion is as shown. I'm not reading it all out again. Those in favour, please show. And against? And... Oh, go on then. Abstention. Right. Thank you. Right. Let's move on then to the draft internal audit plan.
Thank you, Chair. So on page 93 of your agenda, you have the draft internal audit plan for 2025-26. We discussed earlier our approach to developing this plan, and I also mentioned, Chair, to you that as of this year, we have what we're calling a 6+6 plan. So it's not an annual plan. This is for the next 6 months. And in about 5 months' time, we will review and refresh the plan to ensure that we produce another draft audit plan for the final 6 months of the financial year, and that as far as possible we address the risks that are pertinent to the Council.
What questions do we have? Elizabeth.
I'm taking though out to be throughout on the agenda item 11, the table, big pull-out table. It said under indicative quarter, all down that column, it says, though out 2025. It must be throughout.
It is throughout, Chair,
Yeah.
yes. Yes.
Yeah. Just to. So it's.
It's not an April Fool, I promise you. It's a typo.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Come on.
Okay. Any other questions? Come on.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was just trying to find the relevant document from the last meeting. Just a question on clarification. So last meeting, we had the internal audit activity progress report, and then now we have the audit risk assurance draft internal audit plan. Are they the same thing, but like at a different stage, or?
Yeah, so at your last meeting, that was the internal audit plan for 2024-25 and the progress against it. So it would have come a year ago to this committee to have been agreed by the committee. This is the brand new plan that we will look to deliver this financial year. So it's a different year, yeah.
Thank you. It was a silly question. Apologies.
That's succinct. Thank you. Okay. No further questions. Then let's move to the decision, which is that the committee resolves to note that the draft internal audit plan 25-26 reflects the current risk profile of the council, and secondly, agree the draft internal audit plan 25-26 as detailed in Appendix A. Do I have a proposer for that, please? Thank you, Matthew. And a seconder. Thank you, Martin. Marginally, just right. We'll race next time. Let's move on then. Thank you so much, Piers. You're off the hook briefly as I hand over to Andrew to introduce the risk register.
Take a vote.
I have to ask, sorry, do we want to take a break, or would you be willing?
Do we need to take a vote on that last item?
Oh,
We did the proposer and seconder.
but it was so obvious. Okay. My desperation to move on. Okay, all those in favour of the decision, thank you, and that's unanimous. Let's move on then.
Now you need to offer a break. So I've been really pedantic.
That's fine. We have the opportunity now to take a break. I suspect there's less than 30 minutes to go, but your choice. Anybody want the break? No. Okay. Sorry? No, you've tried often enough to put this off, Andrew. Now it's your chance to.
I was going to ask if Piers wanted to present.
Yeah.
So this is the, in front of you, the next item is the strategic risk register update, which has been prepared by Hannah Kent in our policy and governance team. This is building on the extremely comprehensive review of the risk register at the last meeting, and Hannah's given an update on progress since, as we bring it to every committee. And there was a slightly new format of presenting the risk register, which we saw at the last meeting as well. So in our update, Hannah has noticed the progress that we've made. So we're building 6 new strategic risks on the risk register. And I think the paragraph I really wanted to highlight to you is that we are developing a standalone local government reorganisation risk register. We have that as a risk on the risk register it is now, but actually it's so all-encompassing, we're going to try and capture everything in a separate risk register, which even then probably won't capture absolutely everything, but we'll bring that to you at the next committee. As the update notes, all 25 strategic risks have been reviewed and assessed since in the last quarter. Certainly never done that before. And of the 6 brand new risks, 1 is still in the process of being built, so it doesn't show on the risk register, and that's health and safety, which is just having the officer capacity to do it. I should absolutely stress that that doesn't mean that we're not considering health and safety. We have long-standing health and safety procedures. We have a sort of biannual health and safety committee, which the chief executive chairs. We have many procedures in place. It's just, it's not yet built on the risk register, that risk. I just don't want you to read that and think the council isn't considering health and safety. So that's followed as an appendix by the strategic risk register, which is bigger than ever before. So I'm happy to take any questions, although if any of them relate to the risk register in detail and any of those individual services, I may have to take them away and come back to you with an answer. But Yes, very happy to take any questions, Chair.
It's, SR13, successful cyber attack on the council, which is high risk, but has remained as a trend stable. And I just wondered whether, in the light of the situation that Tewkesbury found themselves in, whether that might have affected our risk, or have we learnt from Tewkesbury? Because I know that I think we supported Tewkesbury, didn't we?
Yeah, so I'll always give a slight caveat here that I will give a slightly wary answer about cybersecurity in open domain.
Yeah.
The risk was reviewed after Tewkesbury. We gave a lot of support to Tewkesbury, and without saying too much, members of our team were sort of instrumental in identifying issues there and helping them resolve them. So we have reviewed it since, and we have had internal meetings and procedures to learn the lessons that we can from what happened at Tewkesbury.
Okay.
Chris, what's the risk identification process and syndicate? Please.
We have a whole risk management sort of process which comes to this committee periodically for review. Essentially, it's down to service managers to be compiling risk registers for their own particular service. And then we have an officer governance group which reviews risk registers and reviews the strategic risk register. And occasionally we will elevate things from the service risk to a strategic risk. So a good example over the last year is the risk around the new social housing regulator. It's a service risk and it's now a strategic risk. So we have a whole process, Chris, which I can send to you. It would take me far too long to talk through in the meeting, but essentially it's on those service managers and directors to identify the risks and record them.
So the lower level risks which get escalated to this level, how is management of those risks monitored? Because some of those, although they're not at strategic level, will have a serious impact on the council if they materialise.
Essentially, they'll be managed by heads of service working with their directors. If we think the risk is serious enough, like it would have a sort of fundamental risk on service provision, financial risk, reputational risk, they would be escalated to this strategic risk register and be reviewed by members on the Audit and Standards Committee.
Do we have access to those lower level risk registers if we ask nicely, or even if we don't ask nicely?
I trying to think on idea, Jen, if members have default access to service risk registers, and I can't recall, Chris, so I'd have to check that.
Okay.
You certainly have access to the risk register system, Chris. As you're new to the committee, if you'd like me to arrange someone to do a bit of training for you on how to see the
Yes,
risks,
please. That would be.
Yeah.
I tried. There was something in one of the notes that Bob sent to me that said "click here to log on."
Yeah.
And it kept asking me for passwords and usernames, and
We
which I had at that stage.
We can certainly get you set up, Chris.
Okay.
Because when the Idea Gen system was built, and I'm going back a couple of years ago, one of the sort of non-negotiables, if you like, that we needed members to be able to access the risk register systems because they couldn't on our previous risk system. Right. So you definitely can for the strategic risk. I'll get you set up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I think these ones, the questions are the same questions I ask most Audit and Standards committees. Well, one is specifically about SR 19 around non-compliance with social housing regulation, because that's been on there a little while now, and yet it sort of hasn't got a target risk matrix. I sort of understand why some of the other ones may not have targets, but you know, I think I said last time, I would expect a target to be set. It might change, but there are quite a lot without any targets. Yeah. And then there are also a number which, say on page 8, SR 22, where the target risk is exactly the same as the sort of unmitigated risk. And that might be correct if we don't do anything, but I think it's probably not quite right. We probably want to mitigate a risk down rather than leave it as it is. Similarly, SR23, failure to deliver May 25 county council elections. Again, the risk is the same as the mitigated as unmitigated. So again, that doesn't seem right. And there's quite a few actually. There's SR3 is exactly the same. So there's either gaps or they're exactly the same as the unmitigated risk, which I don't think is correct.
Okay. I'll take that specific point back to the team and put it in the review for next quarter. Sure.
And that include so I don't understand why so many of them have not got a target on them, because there are quite a few. Is that an omission, or is there something in the process that says it doesn't need one?
No, that's an omission.
Right, okay, thanks. Chris?
Indicated risk of non-compliance, because there's so many things you can't comply with, that actually giving a score to it at this level would be, at best, an educated guess. For something like this, you're better off looking at the decomposed risks and saying, which of those, where are we scoring those, what's our target on that one? This for me, I had many arguments about risk lists like this, where actually the risk as stated on here is at such a high level that it's almost impossible to know how you're doing with managing it and what your targets are, or even how severe it is. You just can't know from that description. Oh yeah, I've been there. I know how difficult it is sometimes.
I think that's a really fair point, and you're absolutely right that the scoring of these things is a bit of an educated guess, because we've had lots of conversations here about, what's a major impact, what's a catastrophic impact. I think for me, what's changed in bringing the risk register to audit standards that we didn't used to do before is that we're having this open conversation with members that these are what we think are the major risk impacting on the council. Of course, we're not going through in depth every single control or every single impact, but as members, you are able to see what we as officers have as assessed as being the major risks. And as was covered in the audit plan, it also helps inform the audit planning process, because peers and colleagues are able to see this is what management think are the major risks on the council. And if something's on here and we've not had an audit for 10 years, then that ought to be straight on the audit plan. So I agree, this is only part of a picture, and you can never get with some of these ones. I mean, take the housing regulator, that is dozens of standards and huge amounts of work, and we're just assessing it in a snapshot here.
Okay.
Probably following on from that, SR7, difficulty in recruiting and retaining staff with the right skills, values and behaviours, has got a relatively low risk assessment here. But it looks to me as if it's a risk that's done almost prior to local government reorganisation. And I suppose I'm following on from what you said, that you are going to be redoing the risk register to take in all sorts of associated issues. And I hope that this will be a fairly significant one, because in the flux of local government at the moment, I should imagine this would be quite a high level risk rather than a low level one.
You've hit the nail on the head throughout that question, essentially, in that, yes, that risk predates local government reorganisation. It comes from 2 or 3 years ago when we were having issues in a couple of specific services. As I said, we will be having a local government reorganisation specific risk register, and if that's not the first thing on the list, it will probably be the second thing on the list, because I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm quite concerned about SR17, failure to fulfil the requirements of the building safety regulator. Looking at the notes on it, the problem seems to be the shortage of registered building inspectors. So presumably that indicates the buildings are safe, but we can't prove it, or might not be safe, but we don't know because we can't get them inspected. I mean, that seems to be like quite quite a major cause for concern, please reassure me.
Hopefully I can, because it's not about the safety of buildings, it's about the resilience of the service. So the original risk here was because with changes to the building safety regulator, I think this time last year, all of our building safety team had to essentially re-qualify, take a test to prove that they were the right professional qualification. And that was the same throughout the country. So the risk was, if the team didn't pass, then we wouldn't be able to run a building control service. The risk has evolved now in a sense that what's happened in the industry is that lots of quite experienced building safety inspectors chose that as the right time to retire or move on or something like that. So there is now a shortage of them nationally. And in the context of local government reorganisation, there is a risk that we might lose staff, which might make it difficult to run a building control service. And we run a shared service with Gloucester. So this is about appropriate staffing levels. It's not about, we're not saying that we feel they're unsafe buildings.
So we lock all the doors and don't let them out.
It's an option, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I was just a little bit perplexed on page 15 that we've got SR26 health and safety, which is a standard risk. I work in the nuclear decommissioning industry, and health and safety is right at the top. We've had risks on health and safety for 50, 60 years. It's our number one risk. On here, it seems to have suddenly appeared as unknown, as a new risk. I guess it's probably the context of why it's suddenly on here and why it wasn't an existing risk to be managed.
Yeah, I think it's probably on, maybe come back to Chris's point earlier, it will be on service risk registers and how we manage the service. Just we've never recognised it on the risk register corporately as a risk to be included and reported here. As I was sort of at pains to say in my introduction, we do have very well established processes around health and safety, including working with partners, for example, with Ubico to look at their health and safety procedures. So we do have these. We're just building them up onto the risk register. So I completely take the point. It looks a bit odd that all of a sudden we've discovered health and safety, but it's actually we just haven't had it on this strategic risk register before. Each individual service has been assessing health and safety. I have to say, when I came to Stroud from another local authority, that's one of the things which really impressed me, the focus we had. I was asked to do an immediate health and safety assessment of the finance service, and I was like, that's something I'd never been asked to do before. So we've got these things which need to document them in here. Yeah,
I mean, it was slightly facetious. I know that we have good health and safety. It was more of a question of the optics of it suddenly leaping out a new one without any context. So I think my point is, but other risks that get escalated, from the operational risks, there's a bit more narrative in the report to say this is where it's come from, and it's just suddenly appeared.
Okay, let's put Chris. I was really optimistic of me saying that we had only half an hour to go, doesn't it? Jinx that whole thing.
I think it probably does. I'll ask the team to look at the wording, but I would. A cyber attack which causes disruption to the council probably would be viewed by some as successful. Again, I don't really want to get into that too detailed, but I will ask the team to just consider if they think that's the right wording. I understand.
Okay. No further questions. Let's move on to look at the work programme, and just curious to know if anybody has anything they wish to add to this work programme. Kate.
Well, it's just to clarify, in September, we have something called the Corporate Care Standards Performance Update. I just want to be clear about what that is.
I can do that, and that's a really fair question because it's not clear, is it? That's I don't know if members remember last year. That's the report that covers all the stats on basically the contact centre, how people have contacted us, how many calls we've had, how many we've answered, the times. I think we included something on complaints in there as well, response times and things like that. It's that, how quickly we're responding to people who contact us.
Oh, so you've said something that's very dear to my heart. You've mentioned the word complaints, and I would very much like that report, if it's possible, to include complaints in it. Not just complaints, but also compliments, and how those are recorded, how many we've had, ombudsman complaints, successful, or whatever. I would quite like to have a report at some point this year which identifies that, and also, if possible, what steps individual service areas are taking and how they're learning from the complaints, because I've always viewed complaints not in a negative way, but in a positive way. So as I think we said earlier, if the bins aren't being collected, then it's very helpful to know if people are complaining, and then also knowing what steps Ubico are taking or to rectify. So I'd like something a little bit comprehensive about complaints, if that's possible.
It absolutely is, and I've just been back and checked the last report that we did, and it does include complaints data, not in a huge amount of detail, because it notes that the local government ombudsman was bringing in a new complaints code, which I actually read on Friday. So that's it's a really useful read, actually, I have to say. So yes, it will include complaints data, and our policy is a complaints and compliments policy. We were very clear to do that. Although to damper expectations, we do get more complaints than we do compliments, but the policy does cover them.
Thank you. Then let's move on to the internal audit activity progress report. To note, of course, that if they wish to, if anybody wants to discuss exempt Annex 1, we'll need to vote to go into a closed session. So we'll take any questions regarding the public report prior to entering that closed session, if we enter that closed session. So, Piyush, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so on page 117, you have the ARA progress report, which shows progress against the internal audit plan for 2024-25, delivered up to March. So you have a table, Chair, which shows 4 pieces of work that we have delivered, and I'm delighted to say that all of those have been given an acceptable level of assurance. And just to say, based on a question a moment ago, there is a report looking at the Gloucestershire Building Control Partnership, which looked at the control arrangements in place for compliance with the building regulations. So that might be something to look at. On page 124 then, Chair, I just mentioned that we have now had our EQA review, and I'm delighted to say that we've been able to attain the highest level of compliance. So I just want to thank, if I may, Chair, with your permission, the whole ARA team who do such good work, and it's a reflection of the work of the entire team. And so thank you for allowing me to do that, and that report will come to your next committee because we haven't received it yet. So you then have, Chair, as you mentioned, the recommendation monitoring report, and there is a graph which shows, I'm delighted to say, a really good trajectory, and you know, the outstanding recommendations are coming down. I understand that there are some stubborn ones, but in general, that's a good trajectory and direction of travel. On page 127, then you have progress against the actual internal audit plan for 2024-25, And on page 129, Chair, there is a public and non-public set of papers which provides more detail on the outstanding recommendations.
Thank you. Yes, when I spoke to the external auditor, he seemed quite disappointed that he wasn't able to find anything. So, so I was really pleased for you on that. So well done.
Can I just thank all of the officers and members of this council who you completed the survey or managed to speak to the assessor. So thank you very much for your support on that as well.
Okay, let's open this up for questions. Chris.
That's
That's it.
on the table on page 119. The number of recommendations range from 3 medium to 1 high, 6 medium and 2 low, and yet they're all rated as acceptable. Does that mean there's a wide band where they're classed as acceptable? Is that unusual?
No, not at all, Chair. The auditor takes a professional view based on all of the work that was undertaken. And so whilst there is a high, that does not translate automatically into something that's less than acceptable, because the auditor would take a view as to what it is, also management's response and how, do they accept his recommendations to take care of that high risk. So the fact that there is a high risk does not mean you cannot achieve an acceptable.
And
If you look at page 118, it defines what the different categories
Yeah, yeah.
are. So, yeah.
so there's 7 recommendations listed in paragraph 2.4. Do you do any follow-up work to make sure that those are implemented, or somebody says that's not right because, is there a follow-up to those recommendations so that they are all closed?
Apologies, yes. So we do include a report on the implementation of recommendations. So our auditors do follow up on those. And I'm just trying to find, I mentioned it a moment ago, didn't I? Page 124, you have the recommendation monitoring report. So we will go back when the recommendations are due, and we will then report to this committee on those that have been implemented, or rather those that haven't been implemented.
Yeah, I was going to, on the same reports, look at that. So on the homeless prevention one on page 119, on the detail on page 123, I know it's deemed acceptable, but if I look at Roman numeral 7 and Roman numeral 8, if I read that, and I understand that perhaps there's a slight concern because it says no demonstration that staff are adequately or appropriately trained and up to date with any changing regulatory requirements. I mean, I suppose it's because it says demonstration, it means that they might, but you can't demonstrate it. And I know that if you get any challenge, you have to be able to demonstrate it. You can't just say, oh, yes, they are. You have to say, they are, and this is the proof, this is the, this is the, whatever it is that they are. And then also says that the work undertaken by caseworkers is not quality checked, all information inputs are independently verified or reviewed. So that's making sure that the data is accurate. Again, I would just view this as quite important areas. And I know that we had a discussion in our pre-brief that I was a little bit concerned that that was acceptable when I, in my views, put in Councillor Hayes' view. I'm not sure whether it would be in my book, because there's some quite important things there on a very sensitive and a very important area of homelessness that as a council we need to make sure we get right. And so these sort of things to me are quite important that we need to get right and get right quickly.
I'm looking at my colleagues because we have the author of the report sitting next to me to provide a view. I beg your pardon, wrong auditor, sorry, it was Joe. I mean, no, it is a judgment, Chair, and I take what you're saying, but given all of the interactions, the discussions with management, their responses to this, and, sometimes we go, they know that there is an issue, they're maybe partway through doing something, so it's not necessarily new that we're revealing it in our report, it's something that they may already be working on. So in other words, there are often mitigations, which something on paper may look, crikey, that's quite serious, but there are actions afoot to mitigate it in some way. We come along, we agree a set of recommendations, and management agree those, and we'll then report on the progress of those recommendations.
I mean, essentially, if I cut to the chase, I think somehow we want reassurance that those actions have been addressed, perhaps at the next committee in some sort of report or update.
I think what we'd suggested was for you, Piers, to be looking into that, and if necessary, to ask the officer to come to the next meeting. So they've had the opportunity now to see the report and your judgment collectively about whether it's worth asking them to come and give us an update. Andrew, looks like you wanted to come in. No?
I mean, attendance at this committee is for the committee to. I cannot ask an officer to come. It would be at the invitation of the committee.
Sorry, no, it was more about your view on how they were progressing towards that, to resolving those recommendations, as to whether you could recommend to me, that we invite them. Is that how it would work?
So, historically, it's if the committee is concerned about an issue, then you can essentially task myself and Piers to speak to the relevant manager to come back to the next committee with an update report. Okay. So we can do that. Alternatively, if you didn't think it was that pressing, we could highlight those recommendations on the next lot of recommendation monitoring to say to you, we've had this was discussed, this is where we are, and if progress is not satisfactory, then we can invite the manager to the next one. But it's your call, really, members, which you would like.
It would be at your invitation, not mine, Chair.
What's your preference there?
I think I want, I think the first level, get a report and an update.
Yep.
Which we could, depending on what it says, before the actual committee, and make a decision as to whether we think that the head of service or the manager needs to come in. Depending on, I mean, if they've addressed everything, then there'll be obviously no need. But if there is still concerns they haven't addressed things, I haven't addressed things quickly enough, then there'll be a concern we might bring them in.
Can I suggest then, with your agreement, Chair, is that we put on the agenda for the next committee that there'll be a written update, and then when we prepare for the next committee, we can ask the manager to come along to the chairs and vice chairs briefing, and if we think there's things that are outstanding that the committee would like to know about, we can invite them along to the meeting itself.
Does that meet the committee's approval? Yeah. Okay, great. Yep, happy, thanks. Good. Any other questions on this? Chris? Yeah.
A specific officer, we put it in writing so that everybody knows, the officer knows there's some advance warning that we're going to invite them. I just have this feeling if there's an open-ended, we can ask people to come here, it could get top heavy and too detailed. I'm just a little wary that as to who comes to answer the question.
So again, it's members' call, but my advice on this one is that what we've done in the past, which has been quite successful, is that where we've had limited assurance audits, we've invited those officers along so they can reassure the committee that they are doing something. This one's a little bit different and it's an acceptable audit, but there's still concerns from the committee, which is perfectly valid. I think it tends to be when there's been a particular piece of audit work and we want to see a follow-up to that. We historically have been able to sort of answer members' questions for the most part through the involvement of the auditors. There have been a number of examples over the years. Most recently, the housing out of hours service, we had Tara here in January to talk about that because that was a particular audit concern. So I think it's best following on from the particular audits. Don't think we need to change the member question procedure, if I understood you correctly, Chris, to reflect it.
What I would suggest is that if people have got concerns, let's talk to Martin and myself, because prior to each meeting, we have a briefing with discussion with Andrew, and we can at that point invite them to the meeting that's coming up, yeah, rather than doing it through a formal members' question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. In that case, let's read out the decision, which is that the committee resolves to accept the progress against the internal audit plan 24-25, to accept the assurance opinions provided in relation to the effectiveness of the council's control environment comprising of risk management, control and governance arrangements, and to note the number of recommendations that remain open from 22-23, 23-24 and 24-25 to date. Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Kate, and a seconder. Thank you, Martin. I suppose you want to vote on this one, don't you? Okay, all those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay. In which case, we will wrap up the meeting now. Thank you to all the officers for giving it your evenings, and obviously to the members as well. And look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.